Hey everyone, so it's been about a week since the first round of pre-order deliveries happened for all of the new Apple products, so the iPhones as well as the iPad mini, and I've had a little bit of a play about with all of the devices, and whilst I'll do separate videos for the iPhone mini and iPhone Pro Max, in this video what I want to do is concentrate on the iPad mini. This is a product that initially I wasn't really that interested in. I ended up ordering it simply because I was surprised that it was still available for pre-order even a few days after I'd ordered my 13 Pro Max. The main sort of reason for me ordering this particular device was as a media device. Maybe about a year and a half ago, I actually gave my iPad Air. This is an original first gen iPad Air. I gave that to my daughter because basically she was still using our old iPad, an iPad 3. So that kind of tells you how the iPads tend to live quite long lives in my household. Because I'd kind of given my iPad away, I wasn't really using it as much, and especially after I got the MacBook, I had no real need for it because all of the editing that I used to do on the iPad, I was now doing either on my phone for a few years in between, and then as soon as I got the MacBook, everything was being done on that. So the iPads generally, they're only used for two real things. They were used for gaming and sort of entertainment, movies, TV shows, anything, YouTube, anything that we wanted to just watch on the side and not necessarily watch on a big screen, not disturb everybody else, not take up the TV essentially. And then the other thing was basically HomeKit, and HomeKit just being able to see all the devices, not necessarily as a home hub. That's something that I did contemplate for a little while, actually using this and sticking it on a wall and using it as a home hub for that purpose. But in particular this one, the smaller one, I was only really interested in it as a media device. So it was something that, because of the form factor, and it is a very good form factor in terms of being easily usable with one hand. You can hold it without it fatiguing your hand too much for a longer period of time as well. However, the key things for me that kind of let this whole experience down comes down to three key things. So firstly, it's the screen. So the screen, whilst being very good and being a HDR display, and it probably, in comparison to every other tablet out there, it will probably be in the size and the price point, it'll probably be a very good screen. But for me personally, because I'm so used to using OLED, the TV behind me is obviously OLED. For the last 4 generations of iPhone, I've had OLED displays, and I've virtually not looked at any display other than OLED, apart from my MacBook. And the MacBook, to be fair, does a very good job with HDR content as well. However, I've never used the MacBook for actual media consumption. So I produce my videos using it, but that's all in Final Cut Pro. I'm never actually watching that back on the internal display. And obviously, as you can see from the layout of my room, most of my videos tend to be quite bright. The whole idea of me uploading every video in HDR is so then we get a very impactful image. But yeah, I just found the screen really lacking. So firstly, it's the brightness issue. So it simply doesn't get bright enough when you're anywhere near Windows. So at the moment, if I just show you, this is full brightness, and I'll just unlock it, and that is the full brightness on the home screen. And when I compare this to any other device that I've got in the house, usually I'm around about a third to a quarter mark on the actual brightness scale. With this particular iPad, I have to have it maxed out all the time, and obviously the auto brightness then pushes it to the maximum automatically as well. So the screen, firstly, it just isn't bright enough for me for media consumption. And secondly, the biggest issue with regards to the brightness and the screen is to do with how it handles blacks. And basically blacks become grey, and no matter what I watch, if I'm looking for any type of HDR impact, I simply don't get it. The next biggest issue for me, once again from the media side of things, is the speakers. So yes, it does have stereo speakers, probably in comparison to mono speakers, all the ones on the previous iPads. It's probably a big improvement, and probably against the original iPad mini is probably a big improvement. However, I'm comparing it to iPhones, and considering how small an iPhone is in comparison, as you will have seen from my comparison video that I actually did earlier in the week, it's way quieter than virtually any iPhone that I've tested recently. It doesn't even hit 100 decibels, and my 13 Pro Max almost hit 110. So that's quite a big difference. The actual sound that you get from it, once again, I don't think it's as impactful as I would have thought. Possibly it could be swayed slightly because the only real sort of interaction I've had with iPads in recent years has been a iPad Pro and iPhones. So both of those obviously at the moment producing better sound than what I think this is producing, and basically I'd always have this maxed out. If I'm in a room where I've got the TV on and I've just got something on that I want to watch, maybe a YouTube clip, maybe a football game, something like that, something that I want to keep an eye on but not necessarily watch and give all my attention to, I do have to actually look down at it just to see what's actually going on, for the simple reason that even when it's maxed out, it's not actually that loud. Others may say differently and their experience may be different, but for me personally, I've found the speakers not to be very good. Flipping it around, and one thing that I really do like is the new volume buttons that they've actually got on it. So the way the volume buttons work is no matter what orientation you have it in when you're watching something, your top button is always volume up and your bottom volume button is always volume down. So the software will actually detect which way around you're holding the iPad, and it'll automatically flip those for you, so you never have to actually think which way around am I holding it. All you have to do is whichever button's at the top, increase the volume, and whichever button's at the bottom, decrease the volume. So that's a really nice touch. Coming on to the third biggest issue for me, and that is something that I've mentioned in the past, not necessarily in my videos, but probably on chat, in messages, things like that. And that is the fact that ever since I've had Face ID, it's something that I wouldn't want to go back to Touch ID. And this has kind of just cemented that for me. So whenever I'm doing anything on the web, when I'm logging into websites, when I'm logging into my NAS drive, occasionally it'll, even banking apps, things like that, whenever you need any type of authentication, with the iPhones, I'm just so used to it just already being done. So whatever the interaction is, all I need to do is swipe and the interaction is done. Whereas with this, I've almost had to get used to having to maneuver my hand back up to the top of the iPad and actually press it. Initially, when I set this up, I did actually have a passcode and Touch ID enabled. Eventually, I got so fed up of having to move and press it that I actually disabled the passcode altogether. Hence why at the moment this is actually fully reset, because basically I was just testing things out and I got to the point where I didn't want to use Touch ID at all. I know other people will say otherwise. Some people will probably want it back on the phones because of wearing masks and things like that. For me personally, because I have the Apple Watch, it's not such a big issue because I can always just swipe up and it'll unlock using the Apple Watch. But yeah, on the iPad, for me, Touch ID it doesn't make it better for me. I realize that obviously they can't put Face ID into a tablet of this price point, but having the Touch ID isn't really an improvement for me. Right, coming on to some of the sort of neutral kind of things about the iPad, and that is firstly the build. So the build is very, very nice. The one thing I don't really like is obviously you always get the horrible fingerprints on the Apple logo, but the rest of it, considering it's just bare, slippery, shiny aluminium, it is very, very easy to hold. It's easy to keep hold of, and obviously it does a very, very good job of hiding fingerprints on the rest of the iPad in comparison to just the Apple logo part itself. Obviously, having been a sort of pro iPhone owner since the 10 essentially, all of mine have come with stainless steel build, and that means fingerprints everywhere. So yeah, build wise it's very, very good. Another thing that I was kind of neutral on is the actual battery life itself. So as you can see at the moment I'm on 57%, so I've not actually charged this since 2 days ago, and yesterday I didn't use it heavily, but I did use it for an entire football game pretty much. So I used it around about 2 hours using video streaming, and I think when I started it was around about 89%. So with quite heavy usage, it's still maintaining a decent charge. Is it as good as iPads of the past or any of the bigger iPads? No, it's not, and that's something that because this isn't that kind of device, this is more of a sort sort of portable device that you either use around the house, or obviously I'll come onto it, something that students will probably want to look into. It's a device that, yeah, you don't really mind charging every couple of days, whereas in comparison to the previous iPads where they were probably once a week, you could get away with charging them if you weren't using them too heavily. Now, touching on some of the other sort of negative things is something that everybody's mentioned, and that is the bloated iPadOS sort of feeling that you get, and it's kind of bit of both. So you get the very big bloated space around the home screen, and then you get the very tiny dock that you end up with if you do actually put more icons on there. On my actual iPad setup, so when I actually have it set up and I use my profile, there's a lot more icons that actually pop up here, and what I found is, as everybody else has mentioned, the icons get tiny. A lot of times you'll hit the wrong icon by mistake. The actual operating system itself is a bit of a mess. Now, I've not really delved too much into iPadOS recently, obviously because my iPad Air is so old, my original one. It meant that I didn't really have reason to look too much into the iPad sort of functionality. Plus, I've kind of gone more towards the MacBook side of things anyway for anything productivity wise, and this is just something that would be used for either gaming or media consumption, something around the house, nothing where it's actually that important essentially. Now, coming on to another sort of aspect of this particular iPad, and that's something where I think the kind of people that it's aimed at. So firstly, yeah, this is aimed at people that just want a casual iPad around the house. It's cheap enough if you get the 64 gig model, where you can use it for anything streaming on Netflix, Amazon Prime, Apple TV Plus, Disney Plus, all of these kind of things. Any of your streaming services, it'll be perfect for that, because obviously you don't necessarily lose out because you've got the 64 gig model. Or if you do make use of iCloud, then once again you can go with the 64 gig model and it won't be too much of an issue for you. It's, as I said, it's super portable. You can keep it around the house. It's actually the perfect size for my bedside table, and basically it just means that I can chuck it on there whenever I want to just quickly watch something before I go to bed. I can actually just watch it on this without having to boot anything up, without having to turn a TV on, all those kind of things, and you get a pretty decent size screen. And as others have mentioned, because the aspect ratio is slightly different, it's actually slightly more widescreen. So the black borders that you get on the top and the bottom, they're not quite as wide as some other iPads out there. The other sort of area that I think this is aimed at is students, and in particular here in the UK, and I'm sure it'll be elsewhere as well, you have the sort of Apple student price. And with that, what you could do is basically spec this up with a case with the Apple Pencil, and you've got a very small, compact, and basically easy to use, very versatile companion for people either at school or university. The fact that this got the A15 chip in it does mean that, yeah, you're going to get a fair few years usage out of it, and any of the sort of newer CPU chips that are A15, A14, or any of these, they're going to be going for quite a while anyway. So even if you were to purchase one of these this year, I'm sure if you were to start a uni course, this would probably be fine until you actually finish that course. Similarly with sixth form, all those kind of things. So from a student perspective, it does mean that you can get a fully decked out laptop alternative that is very compact, and it saves you having to carry something where we know that the bigger ones are obviously more fragile. And for those that worry about that kind of thing, it means that this is a lot more easy to basically chuck in a bag, chuck in a laptop bag, or put just your handbag essentially, and you don't necessarily have to worry that much about it getting damaged. From a student perspective, I think this would actually make a very good product. But yeah, that's my thoughts on the iPad mini, the 2021 iPad mini. I'm still kind of torn whether or not I would keep it. At the moment, I don't really have enough usage for it, and basically my daughter's not really that interested in it. I did order the purple thinking that this is something that she's going to really enjoy using. So the form factor of it means that it's not big enough for her to want to use it instead of the iPad Air that she's got, and it's not small enough to where she's going to want to use this instead of her phone. But yeah, that's my initial thoughts after a week. As I say, it's not a really in-depth kind of thing. I've not really gone into the cameras and other aspects of the iPad because my personal usage doesn't entail that. Obviously there are other factors to it. Obviously you have the new wider front facing camera, which gives you the better FaceTime features, and there are other aspects to it. For me personally, none of that really came into it. That wasn't really in my thinking when I was ordering it, and it probably won't be in my thinking if I was to actually either keep this or send it back. Either way, at this moment in time, obviously it's way too soon to make that decision, but yeah, I'll do a follow-up video and I'll let you know what the outcome is. Anyway, that's it for this particular video. I will also have videos coming on the iPhone mini as well as the iPhone 13 Pro Max, so obviously if you are interested in those, hit that subscribe button and also the notification bell. That way you'll get notified as soon as any of my videos drop. And I'd really appreciate if you also give this video a thumbs up. And other than that, thanks very much for watching.